Okay, so we're going to begin our Iowa City Council work session for Tuesday, May the 7th, 2019. The first item is clarification of agenda items. Jeff and I talked ahead of time about the fact that we were behind on reviewing our information packets, so we thought it'd be best to just not have any special topic, but just go into the agenda items and then into the information packets so that we could catch up. So, do you folks have anything to say about agenda items?
7E, the bridge inspection. I'm glad to see that we're working to get kind of a master plan in place in terms of, reviewing the status of our bridges and getting that built into our CIP maybe a little more formally than it has been in the past so that we don't get too far behind on the maintenance of our bridges. So I want to thank staff for working on that. F, I'll jump in if nobody else is going to. Just a quick question. Are we doing a median on Burlington Street?
Hello, Jason Howell, City Engineer. The plan now is to not include a median on.
Okay.
We are looking at going with buffered bike lanes on that stretch of Burlington Street.
So we're decreasing the number of travel lanes for vehicles then, I'm assuming, if we're getting buffered bike lanes in there?
So it will, not really. I mean, we'll keep the same number of travel lanes. We'll narrow them up. There'll be some widening that'll be done, but really it'll be more, probably half widened, half narrowing up the existing travel lanes.
Okay, and so that includes across the bridges, across the river?
Correct. So the
Okay.
bridge width obviously will stay the same, but.
Right.
Yep.
Didn't figure we were doing
Yep,
that.
not for that price.
So, okay, just wanted to clarify
I'm
that.
really happy to see we were able to move ahead on this. It's been a long time, actually.
Yes.
I seem to recall talking about this like 5 years ago. So I know there have been obstacles in revisioning what the intersection might look like, but I'm optimistic it will actually get done.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just glad to see we're not doing the median. I
Sure.
had a major concern over that on Burlington Street, so just want to clarify. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to bring up item 3, which is proclamations. You've probably noticed that we have 5 proclamations. You probably recall that I have asked people to join in the reading of proclamations when there is a large number of them. I can do the first and the last, but I wonder if anybody's interested in doing the 3 in between, which are, let's see, I don't remember what they are, so I have to look at this thing.
I would do 3B.
3B.
I can do 3C.
I'll do 3D.
Okay, so the 3 of you will remember which ones you're going to do. Kelly, you'll make sure that they get them? Huh? Good deal. Thank you. I have a question about item 7D, the Happy Hollow Shelter and Restroom Replacement Project, accepting the work. So if I read correctly, the bid was basically $270,000, but it ultimately cost basically $291,000. What I'm wondering about is why is the cost so high when the contractor had so much trouble actually doing the work and had to rip out a bunch of concrete? I don't understand how that transpired. It seems to me it should be less because of that mistake.
Sure. Julie Seidel-Johnson, Parks and Recreation Director. A large part of that is we found there was a water line that wasn't included in the project that was engineering had lead in it and it had to be replaced. So that was what the additional cost was, not anything. The rework on the concrete was not our cost. And in fact, the additional engineering was not our cost either at that point.
Okay. Thanks.
I had some thoughts or concerns about 9C under correspondence with the snow ordinance review. In reading the letter of the property owners, do we not notify either the property owner or property manager if That's what they seem to be claiming, is that neither they nor their property manager received word about this.
And council's requested a comprehensive memo on our snow operations, and that's still being compiled, so you'll get that detailed. We do notify the property owner at the very outset of the, so in this case, our first snowfall was in November, so if there was violations in November, the property owner gets notified, and in that notification that we tell them, in order for us to take care of this in a timely manner, you will not be notified anymore. We'll still tag the property, but we won't necessarily provide you that notice anymore. You know, in this case, they don't live in Iowa City for us to notify them and give them the opportunity to fix the problem. You may be talking 5, 6, 7 days before the sidewalk then gets cleared. So they do get notice, but it's only once per snow season. And
Okay.
after that, we just follow up with tagging the property.
I didn't read the letter really carefully, but it seemed to me that they had some pretty reasonable suggestions that should be taken into account when we're reconsidering our current snow ordinance and how to
Yeah, and I
enforce it.
think as we transition into our updated software package, we will have a better ability to allow people to register email addresses, and so that we can get electronic notification. We're pretty limited with our, I think, circa 1970s, 80s software right now on what we can do, which is part of the problem. But yes, I think we can improve upon the notification process without sacrificing time. We struggle to accomplish that through our technology that we have right now.
Well, that sounds like it would do it then.
Yeah, I had some concerns about that too, because it racked up quite a bill for them, and then the legal fees, et cetera. So I look forward to talking, when you get the plan, we can talk about it some more.
You should have that in the next week or two.
Okay.
What about the software? I mean, when you talked about being able to do this more efficiently with newer software, what's our time frame on software?
We've begun the implementation process. I think it's about a 12-month process, and we're, I don't know, maybe a month in. Oh, Tracy's here. I didn't see you sneak in. Nope. Come on up, Tracy.
We've been told it's about an 18-month process from when they start. And so next week, we kick it off with a meeting with Intergov. So it won't be immediate, so we're looking, like I said, at a year and a half. But I don't know what modules will go live. We don't know when that will hit. So it might be before the 18 months, depending on which modules become active.
Sure.
We have debriefed a little bit on the sidewalk issue because there's been several. It was a tough winter on sidewalks, as you know. So I think there are some interim steps we can take to improve notification. They're not going to be as seamless as where we want to end up, but we'll present those in the memo.
Thank you.
I guess I wanted to bring up item 9A. We had previously talked about the issue related to quote-unquote puppy mills, and in relation to that, people had brought up Petland. Is council then not wanting to do any further fact-finding on this issue? I seem to recall that I had talked about the concept of potentially a memo or a future work session. Am I alone in saying that I would like to have additional fact-finding or a further exploration, at the very least, in terms of what, reach out to some of our colleagues in Cedar Rapids and sort of see what their thought process was behind their particular ordinance, or not? I mean, obviously, we have to have council support to move forward on it. My view of this issue is that this, for lack of a better term, was sort of a rebuttal by Mr. Moore to the presentation by the owner of Petland. I think both of them bring up some very compelling points. I would at least like to further explore this issue. It's certainly a complicated issue, and various businesses have made substantial investments. But I would also like to look at it in more detail. But are we not getting support for that, or where are the rest of you feeling on that?
I thought this was a very compelling letter and very concerning letter.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of the different perspective, direct conflict in terms
Yeah.
of what he felt was happening versus what was presented to us before. I would be interested, but I really don't want to put this on staff.
Okay. So if we were to maybe just get feedback from whoever the counterpart would be at Cedar Rapids to at least see what got them to their point, or what do people feel like would be the least staff-intensive way forward to at least further explore this issue if there's interest on that? What's your thought on that, Susan?
Were you going to say something, Jim? Go ahead.
My own personal feeling is that we have plenty to do, and
Yep.
I don't want to get distracted. I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and focus on the major things we have to take care of. So if you want to follow up on it, or if a couple council members want to look into it a little bit more and then get back to us, I think that'd be fine. And I can see reaching out to the pet landowner and asking him to respond to the, to the retort, you know. And
The other thought I was having was if, because this is really not an area that I have any understanding of what's going on here, other than what we heard in the correspondence, I would be interested if our staff at the Animal Care and Adoption Center might have some perspective on this matter.
That's what I said last time. I guess if the city manager get interesting to ask the animal control to look into it and just give us like a feedback on that.
Or I would be willing to work with you, Rockme, on that
Okay.
as far as contacting Cedar Rapids. Or
Okay. So I would support both John's proposal, just assuming it's not too time-intensive for staff, just to be able to get that first blush impression. And then Pauline and I can just reach out for fact-finding, just to see if they'll share some of the memos, indicate the council has not really expressed a preference either way, but we would just like to get additional information. And I'd certainly be happy to reach out to the pet landowner, because I think we all don't want to just pass a policy to pass a policy. We want to make sure that we're getting accurate information that we can, so that we're looking at this issue carefully. So I think that should be relatively straightforward. Okay, so we'll follow up on that.
sounds okay to me.
Okay.
Does anybody want to praise Project Green, item 9F? I want to just inviting somebody to do that, because
Well,
it's
it's
nice
pretty
report.
impressive when you see their report, the effort
Very.
that goes into maintaining, I always remember when I worked with Project Green on the landscape improvements at North Market Square, and, they really emphasized think small, because the maintenance that's required when you venture into this realm can be challenging, and that's certainly reflected in the report.
I love their report and the photos, because I wasn't even aware of some of the projects that they take a part in, like the Green Rail along Highway 6. I had no idea that they were a part of that.
They make several specific recommendations. Am I correct in assuming that they have been in contact with the staff, and staff is aware of their specific recommendations, and et cetera?
Julie Seidel Johnson, again, Director of Parks and Recreation. Our staff meets regularly with Project Green and has discussions about the work they do and other work that they'd like to see done throughout all of our areas. So it's really a really good partnership between the two groups.
Great, thanks.
(9G) Gloria Day, they wrote about the, make sure, Saxon Gilmore House on 109 East Market Street. And I guess here they were just, of course, they do show support for the historic preservation of the home, but they also did point out that their commitment of $50,000 to move the site, if I read this correctly, they're not going to be supportive if we move it to the parking lot across the street. So just wanted to point that out. I don't know that we need to have much discussion because we have a little time with the university, but I did just want to point that out.
The options there any of them seem to be very good, it seems, in terms of cost, but certainly we'll get more information on that.
Have they been copied, Jeff, on our cost estimate memos?
Yes.
I thought so. So they did not refer to those costs at all in their letter, which bothers me, frankly, because it's like saying, okay, if you move it across the street to that parking lot, that's not going to make us happy, and we're not going to contribute $50,000. And I think there's another major step is implied in their memo. So if they're fully conscious of the costs of the alternatives that we have, and nothing else changes, fairly uncomfortable decisions going to have to be made 2 or 3 years from now.
I guess I'm wondering, what is the last, I guess, public article in the Press Citizen mentioned the house potentially being moved to that courtyard that's owned by Hodge, by the Newman Center?
Yeah, we already decided not to do that because it undermines the Jefferson Street Historic Preservation District and undermines that particular courtyard, which is a major feature of the district.
And I have one more question. What is there, I guess, any plans for any future interactions with the university regarding future expansion of the campus? On that block, they're already slated to demolish 2 more homes for an entrepreneurship center that's now set to be located across the river anyway. So I guess, is there any action the city could take to prevent further demolition, just so then things could be replaced with grass?
Well, as Jeff knows, and maybe you want to elaborate a little bit, Jeff, we've had conversations with the president and staff at the university about their tentative plans in relation to the Sanxay Gilmore House and in relation to that sort of stretch of Clinton Street. But their plans are pretty preliminary, and I don't think I'm at liberty to just state any more about what I know. Jeff, do you want to elaborate?
No, I think what they've communicated to us is they're going to tear down the buildings, which are viewed as a liability to the university. They'd be vacant otherwise, and create some temporary green space. They have not made any decisions on campus on what possible uses may go there, and that's part of why we have the 3 to 5 years, because they think it's about that time frame before they will make decisions on what might be appropriate at that location. So the university's been very good about bringing us into those discussions at the right times, and we expect that'll continue.
To turn it around, Austin, and congratulations, incidentally, on your new position. It's very
I was
exciting.
noticing a new location for Austin.
Yeah. I wonder if UISG has had conversations with the president and his staff about the university's intentions for that area.
In my opinion, they've actually been somewhat dismissive. I've just personally seen a trend where they like to buy up buildings and then plan to turn them into green space, so i.e. just grass, as they've attempted to do with Old Brick, let's say in the 1970s. So I guess I'm just skeptical about maybe their intentions, especially when these buildings could have been the sense of like that prized missing middle we've been looking for.
Well, I'd urge UISG to reach out to the president, and then who knows what happens. Other items on the agenda? I guess I'll ask a couple questions, which I think I know the answer to, with regard to item 11, 11A in particular, Forest View. Have we received any more petitions that raise that to the threshold required for a supermajority? Okay. And has the conditional rezoning agreement been signed? Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of set to make a decision tonight, assuming, well, I won't say any more. Any other things, items on the agenda? Item 12, water and stormwater utility rates. I don't have any objection to the rate increases, but Procter & Gamble was by far the largest consumer of water from our water utility system. But I don't recall seeing a listing of the top water consumers. I'm sure we have seen it, but I just don't remember it.
It's included in the annual budget. At the very end of your budget, we have a statistical section. I can get you the page number, but we'll list property taxpayers, water users, sewer users, and we do a top 10.
maybe it could just be shared with us next time around when we do the second reading.
Sure.
It was in the presentation, I recall, that Dennis made.
Yeah, great. With regard to item 13, the rental cap moratorium, there had been some informal discussion about possibly collapsing the second and third readings. I don't know if anybody on the council wants to do that, and the staff has not recommended that we do that. Does anybody want to say anything along those lines?
If the developer asks for it, I will.
I mean, the
That's
rental
the
cap.
one to number 13.
Oh, for the return? Yes, I can do that.
Well,
Do you want to collapse?
Well, I'm just wondering if y'all
I
want
see
to
what
do
you're
that. I'm
talking
not
about.
saying let's do it, and it's not being recommended by the staff.
I think
so-
you had talked about getting the additional feedback. Normally, when there's a controversial issue, we don't do that, so we can solicit maximum public feedback. I think certainly probably that would be prudent, but on the other hand, unless people are feeling a little bit reluctant, I'd sort of like to get it over with so we can move on to policy direction and hopefully to emphasize them tonight that we can channel all of their energy, hopefully, into working with staff and other community members for a solution. So I think I probably would support collapsing it, even though that's the exception to the general rule on controversial
Okay,
issues.
so maybe I should
my
have prefaced this a little bit. I personally don't think it's a good idea to collapse the readings. I just know there had been some discussion about possibly doing that. I don't think it's a good idea for me personally because I said in the last meeting that they would have May the 7th and May the 21st to be able to express their views. So I personally would not want to go back on that commitment to the public.
I thought the staff is requesting it. If the staff is not requesting it, why should we do it?
Well,
We don't
I think
have
it would be if we were seeing a surge in permit applications would be the reason, and I
That's the
don't know
main reason.
what's happening.
We're not seeing
I think just give a chance to the people to come and
Yeah.
talk about it, because I thought maybe we are doing it because the staff is doing it. I was completely off.
Tracy, do you want to come up and just mention the number of permits that we received?
Received 7 in the cap
Sorry?
areas. 7?
And this is what's going to happen, like, for those 7, because we did not, after we vote the first.
We'll process them as we typically do, and we will submit inspections, and if they get the inspection and pay the rental permit, then they would get a rental permit.
It's a tight window. Our inspections are a couple weeks out, so you come in to apply, it'll be a couple weeks before we go out and inspect your property, but if it all looks good, you could still, there will be people that get rental permits.
So it's not based on the date of the application, it's
Yes.
based on getting all the pieces completed.
I think if they have their initial inspection, they'll get their, and there are not any huge issues, they'll get their permit.
And those are completely new rental permit, or they have rental
If you have an existing rental permit, we're renewing.
Yes.
Yes, that's not a problem.
But this
It's
is
just new.
completely new.
These
People
are
acting
permits,
fast.
as I understand it, that are currently in capped areas,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And did you see 7 as an exceptionally large number then, or sort of average?
I think we'll continue to get more over time. I just don't know the number.
Are they spread around, or are they?
That I don't know. I can confirm, but I don't have it with me.
Well, another factor that I've thought about is that because we took first consideration last Wednesday, and now we're having second consideration, if we collapsed them, that would give people really only like 5 days or whatever, some
Yeah.
really minimal amount of time to even be aware of and then respond to the proposal. So I don't
notice.
think it's a good idea to collapse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
the council was on board. Okay, anything else in the agenda packet? Because if not, we can move to the April 4th packet.
Yep.
just to get things rolling, I'll mention one thing. Item 3, the race, place, and land use Minneapolis 2040 plan. I was unable to attend that, but I was very curious about it and really wanted to be there. And I wonder if anybody can sort of summarize, give us a very brief synopsis of how that went.
It was a very good event. We had 5 or 6 staff members there, I believe. I wish the room was a little bit more crowded. It was a fairly light crowd, but
It was in the IMU, is that
it was
right?
in the IMU, and there were several competing events going on that evening. I think it was very informational. It's very inspiring what Minneapolis is looking to do. They have a different set of laws up there. Their comp plan, I learned that night that their comp plan does have the force of law behind it. So it's not like our comp plan that depends on a next round of zoning. They will do that next round of zoning, but that comp plan, after it gets adopted at the local and then at the regional level, it becomes the law of the land. They've been getting a lot of credit for eliminating single-family zoning. In other words, what they are moving towards is a by right provision to where you can build duplexes or triplexes in any zone. So a typical subdivision, for example, we only allow duplexes on the corner in certain zones. Minneapolis is moving to a model where you can do duplexes and triplexes of a certain scale and form. It's more of a form-based approach, and trying to integrate those into their neighborhoods. There's a lot of reason behind that, but they really spent a whole lot of time talking about the history of Minneapolis and how racial covenants shaped that city and shaped the demographics of that city. And what they're trying to do is acknowledge that as a community and start to unwind the damage that caused over 50, 60 years when that was prevalent. So I think we can learn a lot from them, from what they've done and where they're going. There were some interesting kind of tangents you can go down. One of the things that they're seeing now is a surge in historic district applications from neighborhoods that are not receptive to these new set of rules. They're suddenly eager to protect themselves through historic designations, and so that's, you never know where these new policies will take you. And it was interesting to hear the planners speak about some of those issues. I do have the slides. So there was 2 PowerPoints. So if anybody's interested, let me know and I'll send you the slides.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that.
So am I hopefully right in thinking that Iowa City never had, you said restrictive covenant?
Racial covenants.
Racial covenant built into our zoning code?
I would think you're right when it comes to the zoning code, but I'm sure there was probably racial covenants used in the community.
For private contracts?
They'll turn up in abstracts.
Yeah.
For private contracts, right? Yeah.
Private restrictive covenant.
Yeah.
And
Well, Minneapolis was not alone.
I'm aware that African Americans and possibly Jewish people were prohibited from living in on-campus housing in the dorms until fairly well into the 20th century.
Sure.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on the April 4th packet? Assuming there's not, let's go to the April 11 packet.
Just glad to see the information, IP 4 and 5 on the census, getting information out there. And I just encourage the public to, stay informed in terms of participating when that gets here, but also people start thinking about that who might look at as job opportunities too during that process, because we're going to need a lot of people to help with that. So Ashley's kind of directing that.
I'll just note that, yes, they're now searching for people interested in a job with the census. The concentration is going to be for next spring and summer. So during that time period, they're looking at hiring well over 1,000 people in our area. So there's a lot of need if anybody has time and interest to apply with the census.
That could be a challenge with the unemployment rate, right?
Yes.
Maybe we could all volunteer. So actually, last I knew, we were having trouble establishing good contacts with the university with regard to collaboration on this for students and so on. Where's that stand?
Well, one of the recent additions we had to our Complete Count Committee is a member of the university staff, so the above all, the communications team lead. Haley has joined us, and that should go a long way in terms of working through the communication channels available to the university, but we're still working on trying to connect with our housing bureaus and all of those things. So we'll continue to work on that, probably through Haley and a couple of others. Yeah.
You're not feeling pessimistic, I take it.
No, the group is really positive and active and have been making a lot of strides so far. It's early in the process, but they're really bonding together and kind of getting out there and doing work on their own. So it's been positive. We've had nice cooperation with our neighboring communities too.
Good. Anything else in the April 11 packet? All right, how about April 18?
Yeah, a lot.
One topic that I was about ready to bring up just before we all got very tired last Tuesday or a couple weeks ago was this question of IP8 relating to where the city of Iowa City is on with our mobile home parks. As everyone's heard, there have been a lot of purchases of mobile home parks, some within the city limits, some outside the city limits in our region as a whole. And it really occurred to me that municipalities could have a key role in terms of addressing a favorable policy solution. Now, what shape that would end up taking, I think, is why we should explore convening a task force or at least have a work session as to what we'd like to see the city do in this regard. These are overwhelming forces that some of our residents, our local residents, are experiencing, as well as residents, and frankly, in the region as a whole. I think we have a unique moment at this time with where we have the relationship with the Johnson County Board of Supervisors, some new leadership on the North Liberty City Council, City of Coralville. I think we made a lot of progress with, but we really need to make sure that we're not too reactive in terms of policy solutions. And so I just wanted to gauge what interest there was on council, and I believe Maz is supportive of this as well, to have a work session to sort of see where we'd need to go. Now, in terms of what sort of an ad hoc committee would look like, I think there's sort of a couple models that potentially we could use. One would be like the ad hoc diversity committee that we did, that Kingsley Botchwade convened, or the committee that we had on riverfront crossings. Obviously, we don't have to decide that tonight, but I just think it'd be good for us to further explore what role the city could have, if any, relating to this mobile home issue. The other piece of it is about 7 years ago, some very good work was done by the UI Legal Clinic and some affordable housing advocates related to city policy. So certainly it would need some updating, but a lot of heavy lifting has already been done. It was done about 7 years ago. So what do people think about that?
I'm not sure what specifically you're referring to right there with regard to 7 years ago.
The UI Clinic, Charlie could maybe help me. Len Sandler and some other affordable housing advocates had done a pretty in-depth study of mobile homes and mobile home policy. I could certainly share that with you. And I had attached essentially a PowerPoint with regards to policies throughout the United States. That was a result of that particular committee. So again, that committee now is spread far and wide. Some of them were law students, but certainly I think some heavy lifting was done. We'd obviously have to update that. But I think it is a critical issue that we need to really be proactive on, because obviously in whatever role the city would play, we'd have to have other partners, counterparties that'd be willing to work with the city in terms of making that happen. But the goal would be to get policy solutions in place so that when the crisis hits, we're more able to respond with sort of a preset approach as opposed to sort of reacting and sort of the spur of the moment, and it's hard to make good policy that way. So does anybody have any interest in further exploration of this?
Well, you mentioned partners, and I think... go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
What
go
I'm
ahead.
recalling is a lot of conversation. I know legal aid has been involved in these conversations, and maybe the clinic as well, about changes that need to be made to the state law to give mobile home tenants more rights.
That's what I'm recalling also, Eleanor, because I know the county had concern about a mobile home that's in the county and not in the city, but their hands were kind of tied because of state laws and any sort of regulations they didn't have any control over. But I think when you're talking about partners, Rockne, the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition, I attended their forum. They called it Tomorrow, the Fight for Mobile Homes. And the room was full of concerned citizens. I'm not sure if you attended that or not, but many of those folks, and Sarah can attest to this too, offered insights and possible strategies for this. So I think that they would be a key partner and would know some contact people that, if we wanted to pursue it further, we could.
I guess it's a really good idea to create a committee from like council members and some community members, especially according to Sarah Barron, the executive director of Affordable Housing Coalition. She said, like many members of the Affordable Housing, Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition are interested in helping this and do researches and studies. If we can just create that committee and we start from there, if you don't want to make it like a work session, we can just go ahead and create the committee and we go from there. And after this committee studies, and they come out with something, they can bring it to us, and after that you can decide.
And/or Sarah's sitting out there, but what about the Affordable Housing Coalition taking lead on this, and we agree to have one or two council members be a part of that, and hopefully they can also get members from the other local city councils and board of supervisors.
That's exactly what we want.
I would be fine with that if we want to do that right now. I just didn't know if we wanted to do not that I love work sessions, but a separate, but if everyone's ready to go right now, I would love to have Sarah get started on it, but I don't know if we wanted to have it separate to figure out what that would look like or not. I don't know.
I think there's a lot that has to be looked at in terms of what we can do, because like Eleanor was saying, I mean, there's so many state laws that preclude a certain thing, preclude us from doing a lot of things.
Yes.
So it's looking at other kinds of approaches or policies that we might be interested in conjunction with other areas that are not going to be in violation of state law. So I would say let's let the Affordable Housing Coalition take the lead, and let's agree to have a couple of people from the council, if they can get a group together, that we would be a part of that.
Yes, and I guess that's what they're going to bring, the studies, and they will find out what the law said, everything that we want, and after that they can come and present to us.
I think that's a pretty good idea, partly because several of the affected mobile trailer courts are not in Iowa City.
Right.
And so are there any in Iowa City? Not to my knowledge, so I just...
Ed Coles is, correct?
Sorry?
It's in Iowa City, but he's not under
It's
threat
not
of being...
outside.
Well, he's not, but that is one that is in.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
but it's not directly affected yet.
Yes.
I mean, it could be.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's obviously the one on the east side that's not inside the city limits, but possibly may be annexed.
The problem is this developer intentionally is buying all the mobile homes. You never know, tomorrow maybe you're going to be one in Iowa City.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
why we can be just ready.
Yep.
Okay, so I think I hear a clear desire on the part of the council to have two people assigned to work with the Affordable Housing Coalition in an effort to develop tactics and strategies that will either avoid or minimize harm associated with these kind of takeovers. We could either find out right now if there are two people who would like to serve, or we could defer that to our next meeting and make that decision at our next meeting.
I don't think we need to. We can just, I'm interested in doing
And
that.
Roz would be a good
If
fit.
somebody else, one is like more people want to, maybe I can give the chance to somebody else. But if
Okay,
you-
who's interested in serving on that? Rockne, are you? I mean, I'm not.
Pauline, anyone else want to?
Well, having lived in mobile homes for over 25 years in the previous part of my life, I would be interested.
Okay, Pauline and Maz, that'd be fine.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Pauline and Maz. All right. Any other items in that packet?
IP7, I seem to be the advocate for the four-legged furry ones tonight, but And maybe we would like to use a similar approach to what we had done with the pet land, but a little bit of background on IP7. This is a request that I've received from community members for an at-large cat ordinance that was recently passed by the city of Des Moines. And without getting into all the details, I'm understanding that one of the big issues associated with population control of some stray cats is that people are not willing to turn them in out of fear that the staff does not have the discretion to fix and release. So what Des Moines has done is done a catch, fix, and release and then clip their ear, while at the same time giving staff discretion to, if they need to put animals to sleep. We've received a lot of feedback on this issue just individually. Staff time's obviously a premium, understand that, but is there any exploration either for further exploration of this as an issue or me taking the lead to get more feedback from this particular organization to more vet this as an issue? But I think it'd be nice to give, because I understand it right now, the staff does not have the discretionary authority to fix and release, is my understanding, unless I'm incorrect on that.
Chris, do you want to come forward? This is Chris Whitmore. She is Director of our Animal Services Operations.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. Yes, we have, when animals are brought into our shelter right now, even if they have an ear tip already that indicates that they've been spayed or neutered, we have no authority to release them back where they came from. TNR, or trap, neuter, and return, would allow us to be able to do that. But we wouldn't have to euthanize a cat just because somebody caught it. Normally, it's people that are catching a cat, not that it's a nuisance, but they don't understand that it's a community cat and that it's, usually there's somebody already feeding it and they're worried that it's getting cold. Usually those things are already provided by caretakers. So I would love to have something that we could do, trap, neuter, and return.
Most people know I'm a cat person, and when I first heard about this, I wasn't in favor of it, but then when I'd seen some letters of folks that had community cats that had been trapped and sent to the shelter but had to be euthanized because they weren't socialized, their ear had been clipped, but they couldn't be released because we didn't have the ordinance, so I would be in favor of looking into it.
Do you have any idea, Chris, what kind of a population we have of community cats?
Well, it's definitely better because of Johnson County Humane Society's been kind of doing this under the radar. And so the population has gone down quite a bit just from what their areas that has been a population out of control. A lot of the mobile home parks, unfortunately, and there are some people that are doing trapping and releasing back in those areas. And so we're not euthanizing as many as we used to, just for the fact that a lot of times these people are going to Iowa Humane Alliance, who do a low-cost spay and neuter, and then they just release them on their own. But unfortunately, when we get those cats in at the shelter after they're caught again, if they have the ear notch, if we can't find a barn home for them to go, we can't legally say, well, you can just let it go where it came from. I definitely think that our population on feral cats is down. I've been in this line of work for 25 years, and we used to euthanize hundreds of cats a year, where we definitely doing a lot better job at that now.
And you would still retain, if we explored this Des Moines concept, the authority to euthanize if there was a spike in population,
yes, exactly.
Or if there were some. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of times if it's a nuisance cat and we give them deterrents and ideas to try to keep them becoming a nuisance to that property owner, they can bring it into us. That's how the ordinance reads in Des Moines, and I'm definitely in favor of that. If it's a nuisance animal and it's causing your cat in your house to cause problems, or you just can't seem to keep him off of your property, you can always bring him into us, even if it has an ear notch.
What's your thoughts on, a lot of people don't like the idea of the cats running loose at all because of the bird population and killing the songbirds and stuff. And so that's
people have brought that up, Susan.
Yep.
One of my advocate friends had said that there has been some pushback. So it is a legitimate issue.
Yeah, and so
there is. In fact, 10 years ago, I was kind of on that. I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea to trap, neuter, and return. But there's so much information out there now that shows that it does work. The funneling effect of stray cats don't become an issue. And so if the caretakers are feeding them, they're not killing all the while. wildlife. And then the spaying and neutering is a big thing, too. They get kind of lazy, and so they don't want to do a lot of hunting on their own.
Sounds like my cats.
So it's a win-win for everyone. It doesn't cost us anything as far as the shelter, because they're going to IHA, getting spayed or neutered, and we're not having to euthanize cats that are very healthy otherwise.
Okay.
I thought at least one of the emails or letters that at least I've seen was strongly opposed to trap neutering.
I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
so do you have any quick response? to
Well,
that?
I think a lot of it is just education. I think that gentleman, when the letter that I read, if it's the same one, he did this job 30 years ago. And I think a lot of things have changed since then, and we've educated shelters, the community, to know that it does work. Other communities, like in San Antonio, Washington, D.C. is doing a big study on it right now, saying that it does work. It does eliminate the cats eventually. Eventually, they don't, when they're not reproducing, they just end up dying by old age, hopefully, or something else that happens to them, and then you're not having the repeated part of it. And I think just educating the public, and I've done a lot of research to tell my staff to go, this are the things that you need to tell them, this is why it's a good thing.
What would you do if we approve something like this and somebody catches a cat, brings it in, it's got a notch, you don't necessarily know where that community cat belongs? How do you decide where to release it, or what do you do?
I think what has been done in the past, which I think would work here, is wherever they live trap that cat, that's where it would go back to. Unless, like we said, if it's a nuisance cat and they were trapping it because it was causing them some kind of hardship or something that they couldn't keep the cat away from their litter box or their sandbox or whatever, then, but ideally, a lot of times, they'll say, oh, I can just let it, if we'd pass this ordinance, they'd say, I can just take it back and let it go, and then once we spay and neuter it, they're fine with it.
Okay.
A lot of times, people have a problem with cats because they're doing their wallering, because they're trying to breed, and so a lot of times the noise nuisance from a stray cat is gone once you spay and neuter it. So I definitely think it's something to look into.
Is there some way you can get us maybe some data on the number of calls for nuisance cats
absolutely.
by the police department? Or,
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming that no one can euthanize a cat on their own if it's on their property and is considered to be a nuisance.
Well, I mean, ideally, they're not supposed to. They're supposed to bring all stray animals to us, and then we try to locate an owner on that cat. If it has an ear notch, if it had a microchip, we'll try to locate their owner. And that would be the distinction between a cat owner and a cat caretaker, because their community cats are different than somebody's pet. So we definitely would keep that a distinction for sure.
Is it against the law for them to do that?
Well, I think if the veterinarian didn't ask them where they got the cat and why they're euthanizing it, a veterinarian could euthanize it if they said, this is my cat. So I think that's definitely
And can they do it themselves?
No.
Okay.
No. That has to be done by a licensed veterinarian.
Okay.
At least in the city.
Okay.
So I don't want to jump the gun here, but I think I'm hearing support for pursuing this TNR.
Sounds pretty good.
Approach. But, some work has to be done before we
And
can
people
get
will have
fully into it.
plenty of time to present objections if need
Yeah.
be.
Jeff?
So do you want us to frame up the issue along with the dog issue and just cats and dogs memo back to you?
Sure.
With good photos,
Before you
yeah.
see the ordinance?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll give you some more data. We'll include a recommendation in there, and then you can work through that. One of the things I want to explore with Chris is our animal services operation is regional in nature, and I just want to talk through that, how we have to engage the other communities, and if those other communities don't have this policy.
Especially like Corville, for sure.
Exactly. How do we manage that?
I know their officer is looking at our approach and thinking that that'll be something that I know the city of North Liberty is looking at it as well. In fact, I'm not even sure they might have passed it already. So it's leaning that way, and I think people are just wanting to find out what's going on.
So we'll have some of those discussions and then return to you.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
All right, any other items for the April 18th packet? Like maybe IP number 9, the employment status analysis.
Yeah, we'd like to cover that if you're ready. I'll have Ashley give a quick overview, and then we'll be available to answer questions.
Okay. So we presented this memo as an analysis for your consideration. At the January 5th budget review session, there were a couple of questions asked about exploring providing benefits to temporary employees, and at the time, we needed to provide council with more information. So we went back, we did a short cost analysis for positions that we felt were most likely to fall within the range of being converted from hourly positions, temporary, to a permanent benefited position. And so that meeting prior to the budget being passed, we were also directed to take more time to present council with a broader analysis. There was little time before the budget needed to be passed, and so the majority of council members wanted to see just more information about what this could mean. So we were planning to work through that analysis all at once and provide you with that information prior to August this year. That's when we start our budget process and planning process to give you all that cost and benefit and other planning information. And it turns out that there's a vacancy in one of the part-time positions that was considered. So currently, Communications Division has one vacancy in the afternoon regular hourly position, and that's one of 3 positions within that division. So I want to summarize the most critical components of the memo, and like Jeff said, we'll take questions. So as I said, there's one vacancy in a communications aide. So they currently work approximately 25 hours a week. And then there are 2 of those positions, 2 employees to fill those roles. We also have in the communications division 1 creative assistant. They work approximately 20 hours a week, and they're also hourly. 2 of those positions out of the 3 are currently filled. So before we presented this memo, this April 18th memo to you, we met with AFSCME representation and reviewed with them our thoughts and process for how we were preparing to analyze each of these positions, not only these 3, but also going forward if there are other positions throughout the city that need consideration as part of this analysis. So when we talked with them, they didn't give us changes to those positions. They were aware of the communications vacancy and asked for more information. So a list of the positions that were being considered. It's very similar to the list that we presented to you in that initial memo, the initial follow-up memo. So very few of those had changed. We ended this time on 22 positions throughout the organization. They're made up from 11 departments or divisions. And we also considered that no full-time or I should say no union employee works less than half-time, so half FTE, which is 20 hours a week. So no positions that worked less than 20 hours a week initially were considered really for this conversion. In the full list that we have, there are positions that could work less than that. There are some throughout, customer service and other types of aid positions that do currently work less than that. We wanted to include them to give the full scope of the potential impact here. So the memo outlines specific things for you to consider. Each of the employees, before I briefly touch on the communications positions, each of the analysis that we need to perform, we have to consider a variety of things because of the union contract that's existing, as well as just other requirements we have. So impacts on existing employees would include an application or test in order for them to be considered for a position that would be converted. We have to post that position for 10 days. So the important thing to realize when this is being considered is that people who currently hold those positions, it's not automatic that they would be filling a now permanent position. They would have to reapply for the job and be reviewed just as any other applicant would be reviewed in those positions. As part of that process, we also would be reviewing qualifications for each position before posting them. So if there's a change in employment status from hourly to a permanent status position, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to improve services potentially, or department efficiencies, or whatever it might be that would change that position, I guess. We would review the minimum qualifications. We did that for both of the communications positions presented to you today. A second thing to consider is that there are bargaining unit provisions, so qualified senior AFSCME employees would have the opportunity to apply for positions. They're not allowed to apply for positions below their grade, but anything at their grade or above, they're welcome to apply for. That would leave the opportunity for those positions to be filled by current AFSCME employees, leaving the current hourly employee potentially without a position or the opportunity to apply for something else at the city. Third impact would be any impacts on supervisory positions. The union contract, the AFSCME contract, prevents bargaining unit employees from being supervised by other bargaining unit employees. So currently, the communications positions that we're considering, this doesn't apply. The supervisor doesn't change. The supervisor currently is a non-bargaining unit employee, so that's not impacted. This may not be the case for other positions that we would consider later this year. So if that were to be the case, current AFSCME positions that are supervising non-bargaining unit employees would also need to be reviewed. So they would need to be reconsidered either as becoming out of the union because they can't supervise those employees, or their responsibilities as supervisors would be reviewed and either reduced or taken away, and that position would be re-reviewed. So that brings me to the basics for the communications position. We detailed in a chart. We would expect to do the same for all positions going forward in future analysis. And I can take any questions that you have about what we presented in the memo or anything that I went through today.
I really have a question. You just said if there is like 3 hourly employees being supervised by an AFSCME employees, like a supervisor, right? If those become no longer hourly, we have to evaluate that position. But if those people, we are not eliminating the position. We are just changing those 3 hourly employees to permanent employee, and they will be there. Why not being supervised by the same person? Why are you saying if they become from hourly to permanent, the person who was supervising them will lose, or we have lose their position, or we have to review the position? Why? I understand that could happen if we don't have those employees at all. But we are not saying we are firing them. We are saying we're making them permanent. They will be there. How come the supervisor will be affected?
I think there's a couple of things to clarify. The first is that currently the union does not, AFSCME contract does not permit non-bargaining unit employees.
You're on the right track. It's the Chapter 20 of the state code does not allow that type of reporting relationship. So if there's an AFSCME employee right now that's supervising hourly, and those hourly become permanent, that same AFSCME employee can no longer supervise them. That's state code. So we have two options. We take that AFSCME employee and we take them out of the union and make them a non-union position, or we have to retool that AFSCME position and take away those supervisory responsibilities, which doesn't necessarily mean the position's eliminated, but the duties of that position will change such that it could change the classification of that position. If they're no longer supervising, then we will have them do something else, presumably, and it may not warrant that same classification. So that's kind of the complexities that come with each of these.
Who's going to supervise those three? Say, for example, 3 people being supervised by AFSCME, and they become permanent. You said the code doesn't allow that to happen. Who will supervise those 3?
That's what we'd have to figure out. That's what the position by position, we would talk to you about that. We'd present you with a situation. We said, okay, this person can no longer supervise these employees, so we're suggesting X, Y, and Z. That's not the case with the positions in front of you today. So I can't tell you exactly what we would suggest for various positions, but that is just a complication to keep in mind as we go down this path in the future, that we might we will run into that situation with some of these positions.
I understand, though, that I've received basically a differing opinion that union leads are done all of the time. Have you looked into the concept of a union lead as opposed to a supervisory role? That essentially it's the same thing, if you could just comment on that?
Well, it's not the same thing. They may direct the work, but they wouldn't be supervising the employee.
Okay, so what's the difference between directing the work and supervising an employee?
The ability to hire, to fire, to discipline, versus saying, okay, today here's our work plan. We are going to go do X, Y, and Z. We do have those.
So we could have the union
those
leads. Okay.
Correct. In some of our other divisions, Parks and Rec comes to mind. We have oftentimes with senior maintenance workers that may be within the union. Those folks have the ability to direct work plans, but they're not responsible for hiring, firing, and discipline.
So the evaluation process of that employee, also the union employee,
Correct.
would be included in that, right?
And those are all things, and that may be a suitable solution as we go down the path with some of these. It may be that you become more of a union lead, as you put it, but that could impact, I'm not saying it will, that could impact that position and where it falls in a classification.
The other question, maybe this would be more of an Elner question relating to the civil service statute. This has been raised as a potential obstacle that civil service would require us to test these people that we would be reconverting. And for lack of a better term, I'm comparing year-round temporary and permanent part-time. The year-round temporary are hourly employees that work throughout the year as opposed to sort of seasonal. It's my understanding we're not focusing on the seasonal.
Correct.
It's my understanding the civil service statute only applies to full-time positions and not part-time positions. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay. So if we were able to then convert from year-round temporary to permanent part-time, that would not trigger the civil service unless we reclassified them to a full-time position.
That's true.
Is that correct?
I think so.
We still have a posting requirement, though, because of the Veterans Preference Statute.
Okay. So that'd be the Veterans Preference Statute.
And we still have then the seniority issue because of the union contract.
Yeah. And so I think that's what would be helpful for us to sort of talk about, because it's my understanding AFSCME is on record wanting this to happen, that they support this. And so if there are state code obstacles, that's one thing. Obviously, we can't change that. And if there are contract issues and there's a mutual agreed to solution, we would not want to do anything over the objection of AFSCME. We certainly would not want to do that. We certainly would not want to have anyone losing their job involuntarily. We would want a direction that staff would negotiate with AFSCME and there would be a shared solution that they would come up with, as opposed to us going through each position and making this decision. So they would literally have a seat at the table, and if there are parts that they would object to, they would object to. Why can't we do that?
We can. That's not what you asked us to do, though. You asked us to present you with the information so that you can make the decision. If you want us to go back and go through all of this and work with ASME and say, here's where we agree and here's where we don't agree, that's fine. But I also want to make it clear that we as staff, particularly me as city manager, we go through this analysis every year with the budget on whether we should keep hourly, go to permanent, hire more hourly. That's part of the budget deliberations that we spend hours and hours and hours going through. So, when it comes to these communications positions, we have considered moving those permanent in the past, and we've chosen not to do that. Matter of fact, we've chosen in this particular case over the years to change what used to be a permanent position to go to an hourly position. And we do that because we have all kinds of competing priorities throughout the city. So where do we need to add permanent staff the most? We need resources to do that, and oftentimes we have to then rely on hourly employees in other parts of the operation. You can look up and down the list of 22 employees or 22 positions that we have. There's great benefit to having permanent people in all those positions, whether it's a lifeguard, communications staff, rec counter, customer service staff. There is enormous benefit to having permanent employees in all of those positions. But there's also a heavy cost that comes with that. And that cost then is competing with our needs in other parts of the organization, whether you're talking police officers or firefighters or finance staff or IT staff, you name any part of the organization that you want. We have to make those decisions. We have to make those recommendations to you. You have to make those decisions. So that's what's challenging about this, because I see merit in each one of these cases on why we should do the permanent. But you just need to understand that there's that opportunity cost again that we have to think about, because if we're spending a couple $100,000, whatever it may be, on this effort, and we're spending a couple $100,000 on moving the minimum wage up, both very good things to do. The reality is we can't add staff in other parts of the organization where we may need it, and I'm talking permanent staff, because this will take top priority, and that's your decision as policymakers, and that's kind of that's what we're trying to do here today, is start that conversation with you.
So for the moment, you've presented us with a template for future positions that will have to be decided. I mean,
Correct.
22 or whatever positions, right? But what you're asking us to do tonight is decide what to do with regard to the communications staff, which is based on that template that you've provided.
So we would go through this 20 more times, is what we're suggesting to you.
Well, in regards to that position, I certainly would be in favor of changing that, because I think it seems to be one of the least complicated to shift it over to permanent, and so a good place to start. And I think in regards to the initial proposal, I think it wasn't really known some of the possible effects that it could have on the employees, not the least of which is that the job requirements would change and people would have to reapply for their positions. And if that is the case, I would hope that the city would do its best to assist any employees that were displaced to find another position within the city.
When I look at this, I'm concerned in a couple regards. One, as Pauline just addressed, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of people who currently work and maybe have worked for the city for a long time in an hourly position of losing their jobs. These are not going to be the same positions. I mean, if it's clear, and I think it makes complete sense, that if we're going to make these permanent and there's going to be significantly more cost associated with them, that we're looking for higher skilled individuals, and so those job descriptions are going to be rewritten. And so in many cases, that people may lose their jobs. I think that's one thing that is really, really unfortunate. I think we have a lot of people who like what they're doing, they like the flexibility, et cetera. I won't go into all the reasons on all the other ones, but I'll focus on the communication one. And I agree with what Jeff said, and I had a really nice conversation with Terry Byers on Monday afternoon, and we talked about these. And what I come down to is, I think some of these positions, and I think the front desk is a specific example of this, where we've had some great success with college students, where it has just fit in as a great part-time job. They've stayed for the whole academic year. They've managed to fit it into their schedule. They've really gotten to know the city. I think they've provided great service in terms of being able to answer questions, et cetera. I also questioned at the front desk, and I don't know the number of phone calls that come in. I don't know the number of people they have to greet and stop to actually, give direction to. But to me, to upgrade those positions and expect somebody to be doing graphic work or project work or whatever, I don't think you're going to get the efficiency that you would desire in those positions because of so many interruptions. I mean, you figure these people are being interrupted every 2 to 3, 5 to 10 minutes. And so as you're trying to work on a project and you keep having to answer the phone, or you have to look up and either greet somebody or just say hi, even if it's an employee, you're just not going to get the efficiency, I don't think, in those positions. And then when you add to that the potential, and it may not be that, but the potential of $67,000 in that change, coming back to what Jeff said, we have a lot of competing priorities. I'd rather see that money go to, middle range union positions where we really need full-time, permanent staff in the city to provide a lot of the services that staff is really stretched with right now. So I don't agree with moving forward. I would prefer to stay with the way we are on this one.
I really think differently. I think we should move the 3 position to permanent position with benefit, and especially we already give instruction to look into the 2. It was 38, suddenly it become 22, right? I remember you presented later, like long time when we brought it up, like 38 employees. Now it's even less than 38. It's only 22. And I think since we already asked them to move, this is supposed to be our first step to do that. What the value of the city? And those people, I'm going to give you another example. Now you give up the example of the front desk. I will give example of the rec center. There is many employees work on how many? Over maybe 30 or something like that. They work at the front desk of the rec center. And during summertime, you don't see those 30. It will reduce the number, and the employees who have been there over the years, they will get more hours. And they being there for a long time. They are not college students. They are single moms. They are people who with family. And I think if we make them permanent and give them the same amount of hours that during summer, during winter and spring, we spread this hour to students because we rehire again. And I see all the time that being happening. Let us make this work hard on converting all of them to permanent, I think. And for now, if we're going to talk about those 3 positions, since you said this is not going to be an effect of losing any position or supervising or anything, let us go ahead and do it. I talked to Jeff before about the front desk, and I said, why not making the front desk person a permanent? And you told me, yes, we can do that, especially now the person left and we can hire new person. We will give them more job description, more things to do. Maybe we can ask for someone who speaks 2 languages to be him. They can do some kind of more job. But I think the value, we have to have a value for the people who work here over the years, 20 hours every week, and they should get benefit. Some of them are not students; they are family, and I really recommend that all the 3 positions right now for the communication to be permanent and to be also giving them benefit.
Jeff or Ashley, could you clarify again? We're not talking 22 people, it was 22 positions, but again, how many? It was over 100-something actual people, right?
That's
Employees?
correct. So there's just 3 that we're considering tonight, but there's 22 positions, and that the range of people working in positions within those 22 positions ranges anywhere from 150 to 180 people.
But we're talking about the people who, before you brought us a memo saying that we have 38 employees Who position, I mean?
It's possible that it was lower in that number initially. You're probably recalling correctly. We did add.
Yeah, it was 38. I can't forget that.
We did add a significant number from recreation, aquatics, and from the library. So that's grown the number that we're considering at this point that would be impacted potentially. So some people work 20 plus hours. Some people work anywhere from 5 to 10 hours.
Yeah, but we're talking about the people who work 20 hours a week over the years.
Right. But if I can clarify, let me use lifeguards for an example. We have lifeguards that work close to 20 hours a week throughout the entire year. We also have lifeguards that are perform those same duties that may work 5 hours or 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week. So even within each position, there's great variability in some cases on how many hours per week. We are now including positions where you could see, lifeguard is a good example. We could go to a model that is more permanent in nature, and we could hire 20-hour-a-week lifeguards on a permanent basis and not have as much need for those that work 5 or 10 hours.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what we're working through here. With several of those positions. And there was library aides, the rec center, customer service. Those are all positions in which you have great variability in the hours worked. But some work close to 20 hours year round, and some don't. So we brought them all in.
When you say like 100-something position, you just like confusing us, and I think you confuse the audience too.
Staff,
because
not positions, 100-some.
There's positions and there's staff in the positions.
It's not positions, it's
Total
staff.
staff.
Individuals.
So like rec center, customer service would be a position, and there's 30 to 40 staff in that position.
I mean, like now you say you including people who work 5 hours, 15 hours. We are not talking about those to make them permanent.
Yes, we are.
But you can't have permanent.
No, we are talking about the people who work 20 hour, at least 20 hour a week, like for years.
Year round, and they're hourly.
Year round.
But
they never, they work. I know one of the rec centers people, 2 of them, I know them personally. They work there for over 2 years, and they work between 20 during summer. They get more hours because the student gone. I'm talking about those really to convert them to permanent.
But we can't convert individual people to permanent. We can convert positions to permanent.
That's what I mean. Position, those terminology is not the
Jeff
method.
is
You have to get to understand what I
telling
mean.
you is there are different hours worked by different people in the same position.
That's what I meant, regardless what you call it, like legal-wise. But that's what I mean. Because he just said there's some people work like really not 20 hours a week.
Yeah, I think
we're not talking about those.
I think the challenge is you cannot have an hourly person, an hourly employee perform the same duties as a benefited. So
I did not say that.
No, I didn't suggest that you did, but that's why we can't convert some to permanent and keep some hourly and expect them to do the same duty. We would have to change the duties so that they're discernible, so that the person working the 5 hours is doing a different job than the person that was hired 20 hours permanent.
Okay, hold on. If we give you the example of the front desk of the rec center, if we are during summer, those people will reduce to say 10 like 10 people only from 30. Why we don't just give them the specific, the more hours and make them permanent and not hire another people? So all those people will be permanent. There is no another one work on the front desk, less hour, and getting the same money. I don't know if you understand what I really want to say.
That makes sense, and that is the
That's what I was looking for. Like, instead of having 2 people, like 3 lifeguard, one of them work 15 hours, 120 and the other 120. That person will go because he works seasonally. Don't hire that person.
Can we focus on the three
Yeah, that's
communication
what I was
positions?
saying.
Because it gets
But
really...
she was talking, the memo is saying even the 22. Why you always want to talk about something that he brought everything on this memo. He talked about the 22 position, and he talked about the 3 people. I guess I have the right to talk about everything in this memo. What you think?
No, he provided a template, a way of
Yes,
thinking about the positions.
Actually, she talked about the 22 people, and it's listed here. And I 22 position, and I was talking about it. And also, I really want to talk about 3 position, and I did. I already talked about it, and I said I would like to move all of them to permanent position with benefit.
What did
That's
the
what
rest?
I said.
What did the rest of you think about the idea of having these 3 positions converted to permanent positions?
I do think that there's great value of, again, in these 3, in this position being converted to permanent. Although Susan does bring up a good point as far as like interruptions at the front desk. I guess that's something that, I don't know if ASME has any thoughts about the positions or anything like that, because I think that ASME has been asked by us to be at the table and voice any concerns, if they have any, so that we're totally aware of any challenges that they might see. As of now, I'm not aware with this position that ASME has concerns. That's not been expressed to me with the current positions that's before us. And so I'm going to support the positions that's before us. I do think that Maz, was getting to just express her concern for future direction. And I think it's very valid that, everybody hears it today, and maybe she was going into the details a little bit, but she wanted to make sure that it is clear that if we needed to convert some positions, more to permanent, that means that 10 positions might go down to 3 positions and 4 positions. She wanted to get that point across, and I did receive that. So thank you for expressing that. So for me, I am going to be supportive of this, and that's before us tonight.
How about the rest of you?
So I just want to, even though these 3 positions, I do want to provide a Tish background, and I promise I'll be super short. This comes as a result of a long process of reclassification from union positions to hourly. It's my understanding about 10 years ago, there were 220 union level positions, permanent part-time. Over about 10 years ago, there was a consultant that was hired for purposes of reclassifying to hourly to save money. One of the key issues here, why are hourly employees ineligible? Because the city sought during collective bargaining to exclude them from benefits by contract. That's a contractual provision that if AFSCME is willing to work with the city to make that happen, we do not need to look at that as some barrier. We can, if AFSCME is willing to do it, we can to do that. I support Maz on the 3. The other thing is that, and maybe that was our fault in terms of direction to staff, I do not want to do anything over the objection of our AFSCME. I want a collective process, and if AFSCME wants to do that, that'd be wonderful. I really hope they do want to do that so that we are not wading into the weeds. I'm glad to wade into the weeds tonight, but I want to fix what went wrong 10 years ago and reverse that process. It is going to cost more money, Jeff. We did reduce the employee benefits levy by 10 cents. I think the taxpayers are entitled to review the funding decisions that we make, but I don't want this to turn into something for fear. We are trying to add to the quality of life of people that deserve benefits, okay? That's what we're trying to do. And I think there are a lot of tools that we have available to prevent the loss of jobs. So for now, let's convert them. Let's hope there's this collective interactive process over the next 4 months. We will get a price tag at the end of that process. Council will have to support it or not. But I think that's what I would at least like to see.
I support the move to permanent, and I'm looking at it in part on
For the 3 positions.
the 3 positions that they're serving in the communications division, and I like the idea of expanding their duties beyond simply, in a sense, serving as a greeter and directing visitors coming into the building. I like the idea of expanding that notion of communication to be broader than that, so it captures some of the other ways in which the city interacts with the public. So I think that makes for a more interesting position that is kind of more up to date with the way in which the city does engage the community. So I kind of like the opportunities that it suggests could be generated by this. You know, there is this issue of how distracted will this person be by their duty serving as someone greeting and directing, but I think that's a manageable problem. So I think it would enhance the position, and I do feel that the greeter is a really important aspect of,
I think it's hugely important.
you know, of they are the face. Anyone who interacts with the public is the face of the city, and so anyone coming into City Hall certainly represents the image of the city and must do so in a really positive way.
I think a desirable feature of people who are greeting people coming in the front door, would be capacity to speak another language. I don't know if that's really possible, because there are other things the people in these positions would have to perform. But my ideal person would be somebody who's, I don't know, reasonably fluent in French, or reasonably fluent in Swahili, or reasonably fluent in Spanish, and I don't know, you know, if we can do that, that's great.
Well, the job description or the table that's included in your memo goes through the change in minimum qualifications. Of course, at a very high level, our job descriptions are more detailed than this, but if you look at the minimum requirements for the communications aid position, we have bilingual skills,
Yep.
and that's just preferred right now. If the council wants us to make that a requirement of the position, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, we look for that skill in just about any position that we hire. We debated whether to make it required or not in this position for purposes of this memo, and we left it at a preference, a strong preference, but
Yeah.
if that's something that you value, we can go out with that requirement.
I personally just think it should remain a preference, a strong preference, but
Yes, my words would be strongly preferred. Pauline, did you want to say anything?
I think I already said that I would be in favor, since it seems to be the less complicated of all the positions. But I think adding on to what Rockne had said, with the entire picture, I think it's extremely important that, I know in the first meeting when you talked about this with HR and other folks, AFSCME played a role in that meeting, and I think it's important that they continue to play a role in that and be invited to the table to talk about the job descriptions, the positions, and et cetera. It's extremely important.
Okay, I think you got direction, Jeff, with regard to these three positions.
Yeah, there was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just would like to close by saying, I know that I'm the one who was really pushing hard this from day one. And my intentions was really not to lay off nobody, because I've been hearing like a lot of rumors going around employees themselves, and some people reach out to me and they say that they start feeling that there is many positions will be eliminated. I just want to tell everybody our intention is not to eliminate any position. We do whatever we can to keep all the positions, and at the same time to try to provide benefit, and if all the council agreed, of course. Thank you.
Okay.
I do want to just clarify one thing, because Councilor Cole has, if I'm interpreting correctly, has suggested a different approach, and that is, instead of bringing you case by case or position by position analysis, that I think your preference, if I understood you correctly, is that we do that internally with AFSCME at the table.
Yes.
We see where we have agreement on, and then we bring that to you, and if there's ones where we don't have agreement on, we can separate those two? Is that?
And that's our fault, Jeff. I don't think we obviously didn't provide that direction, but I certainly did not want a situation where we were steamrolling AFSCME and doing stuff that they did not want to have happen. So that's sort of my thought process, that you would then work out with them.
The caveat that I would put on that is that then I'm likely to go into that saying, here's where I think we get the most value out of doing that. Because there's a price tag associated with each one of these, and I've already made that judgment in the budgets that I've presented to you over my tenure to keep those at hourly. So I just want you all to know at the outset that that's still my recommendation, is to keep those positions hourly, knowing that you want to go in a different direction as a group. I'm happy to sit down with AFSCME and try to determine, from my perspective, from our perspective as a city management team, where we see the most value in converting to permanent, and then where I really don't see, where I feel strongly that there perhaps isn't that value there. And maybe we can shorten that list from 20 to...
Yes. So we'd have the work session on the disagree part.
I would prefer, we've already given staff one direction. I guess my preference would be to have staff continue with the direction we've already given them. We've indicated the interaction with AFSCME and making sure they're apprised of what's going on. And then once staff gives us their recommendation, AFSCME is certainly capable and welcome to give us their rebuttal if there is one, or where they agree with staff, where they disagree, why they do. As I indicated, Terry and I had a great meeting Monday afternoon, and my assumption from that meeting is that there's a number of these positions that AFSCME may not agree with changing to permanent. But I think rather than changing the whole process, that doesn't eliminate AFSCME's ability to have plenty of input to us, and I would hope that they would continue to have that input. So I would rather just let staff go the way we'd already given them direction, and publicly invite AFSCME to make sure that we hear from you.
But if Jeff said he can do it, if he can really do it, why not? We go with the direction that we just give it to him.
He can do it if we tell him to do it.
Yes, we...
Alternatively, I think he's recommending that he continue down the path that he described and actually described in the memo. So
it's your preference.
You just said... What did you say, Jeff? You just said you can do it.
We can keep doing this like we've done tonight. We have another one ready to come to you, or will shortly, and that's the senior center positions. We're starting to work on that because we have a vacancy over there, an anticipated vacancy. So we can continue to do that for 20 more positions, or to follow Councilor Cole's comments, if you want me to sit down with AFSCME and see where we have agreement on which positions hold the most value when you convert them to permanent, and which ones perhaps that either AFSCME or management or maybe both see little value in converting to permanent, we can bring you an abbreviated list and say, these 10 positions, AFSCME and the city agree should remain hourly or should be converted to permanent, and now let's focus on these.
So I guess what Councilor Cole recommended is actually what I thought the direction that we had given. I was not anticipating that we would have each of these before us. I thought that this one was, it happened to, happen earlier than our deadline, and I just thought this came before us, which was a great opportunity for us to give input, understand the role AFSCME and the city has taken, which I'm very comfortable with. So I personally don't think that we need to review all of them. I think that certainly if there's disagreement, as we stated back before, we don't want to get into August and learning that there's this huge disagreement on a lot of issues. And so I would say what Rockne has suggested is what we go by.
Yes, that's what I really meant. Sribu was saying that.
I was going to say, do we have a fourth?
Yeah, have fours.
All right, okay. Jeff, can you restate what the four have directed you to do? So we're on the same way.
We have
It's the second one.
We have 20 positions left. Okay, we're going to go through the same exercise on our end to look at this. We're going to sit down with AFSCME and we're going to see what positions that both sides feel where there would be the most value in converting to permanent. And then we're going to see where both sides think that there may be the least value in converting to permanent, and hopefully come to you with a list that says, AFSCME and the city are in agreement that these positions probably should remain hourly, and we're in agreement that these positions hold a lot of value going to permanent. You'll have to make that determination when I give you the numbers, but for us, they hold the most value to convert to permanent. And then there may be some in between where we have disagreements, and then we'll have to go through the more detailed exercise like we went through tonight with you and let you make that determination.
What Jeff said.
I think there's support for that.
Yes.
Seeing nodding heads. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Right, thanks.
All right, we could probably finish up this information packet, and then we'll have to stop. So we're on the April 18th packet. Are there any other items you want to draw attention to? I want to say something about potholes. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but there are a lot of potholes out there in streets, and a lot of our streets are in just horrible condition. The latter statement is no surprise. We've all known for a long time our streets are in horrible condition, and they are because we don't have enough money to pave them all or repave them all. But the potholes, so we got a memo from, I'm sorry, who did it come from? From Ron about that. And if I understand it correctly, what is it? There's the specific date that we're going to be able to get out there. And, April the 22nd, there's asphalt will be available. Is that for all the pothole work, or is that for like the second crew doing pothole work?
Mr. Pothole Canucky can talk to you about that.
Hi, Ron.
Ron Canucky, Public Works Director. So we are out in the process now. We have hot mix asphalt available. Obviously prioritizing the arterial streets right now, getting work done as quickly as we can. Then we'll get into the residential neighborhoods after we get those areas done. They've made a lot of focus on the Park Road area, which is obviously one of the areas that we've heard a lot of concerns about. So that's where their focus has been as of recent times. Obviously the weather has to cooperate too, so if it continues to rain on us, it slows us down. But they are out and they are making more permanent patches with the hot mix.
Okay, so there's hope.
There is hope, yes.
Good. Drive carefully, everybody. You got to learn how to slalom, in a vehicle. So, all right. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Any other items on the April 18th packet? Oh, man. April 25th packet?
GO bond, we'll be voting on that tonight, and I guess it's actually in the May 2nd one, but we've got the AAA bond rating again.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Well, all right, we could turn to the May 2nd packet, and we probably have a couple minutes. So, May 2nd?
The vendor, somebody going to talk about it?
IP4.
Yeah, we submitted a memo to you. This is a strategic planning item that we've had on your pending list for a while, and you had brought up again during budget. So I thought I'd maybe try to start the conversation by just giving you some statistics and maybe some different options to go down. I'm not really prepared to tell you, exactly what would come of each path you could go down, but I thought maybe seeing the purchasing statistics would help you navigate that discussion.
Jeff, before you do this, it's 20 till right now, and it feels to me like this discussion about the vendor thing will take some time. You have to make a presentation, then we'll have some discussion. I don't think we have time really to do that before the formal meeting. So we can come back to that one item after the formal meeting. Sure. So are there any other topics on the May 2nd?
IP7, the 2019 Party in the Park schedule. So encourage people to take a look at that. Those are always fun events through the summertime.
What about
I was pleased to see they're going to do some dog in the park events. That sounds fun.
Can we talk about the meeting schedule or no?
On IP9, which is the minutes of the April 9th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission, there's a statement that the Monarch Festival is going to be held on Sunday, August 28, and that just does not conform with the calendar. So it's either the day or the date that's wrong.
Okay.
Can we talk about the meeting schedule very quick?
So, yeah, sure, right.
Kelly?
What do you need, Kelly?
Well, I know Mazza's going to be gone for a portion of the summer, I think May 21st through August 1st, if that sounds correct? Or 23rd, I'm sorry.
Like June and July, I just would like to see, because last summer you guys skipped one meeting. Because a lot of people was having commitment during summer. I just want to make sure if you are doing the same thing this time, or the staff maybe they really in need of, there is many works have to done, that's fine, but.
So you're going to be gone all of June and July, is that right? Okay, there are, I think, 4 meetings scheduled in June and July. We certainly can.
I will be calling in though. I like to, there is many good things coming up, and I want to, I'll be calling in. Even though if I call direct, we know direct's really expensive, but I will try my best if the internet thing is not working.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we need to keep the meetings. We have a lot on the agenda. I mean, maybe when we get closer, we can decide we can give up one, but I think we've got a lot.
We've had quite a few recently where we've gone 3 weeks and skipped some and changed the dates, and that's been tough.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that too.
Yeah, just let me know while I'm out. I guess Kelly can text me because we receive texts normally. Anyone can text me on my cell phone. I will receive text normally.
Okay.
So I don't have to call in. Or if you change it for any reason, I just have to know.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to stop there, folks, and we'll return to the work session after our formal meeting. IP number 4 in the May 2nd information packet, which has to do with policy on vendor wages.
Yeah, your strategic plan requests that we consider a policy to limit city business to vendors that pay all employees a wage of $10.10 or higher. What this memo really intended to do is provide some basic information that'll help you with that deliberation. I don't expect that you're going to be able to give me firm direction with one meeting here. So I just really wanted to kind of put some information out there to help you start to think about that. It's your call whether you feel comfortable giving me direction now, whether you want to schedule a work session on this topic. You could request additional information from us, but I felt like in order to get this item checked off the strategic plan, I needed to start that conversation.
I want to say something about that. Yeah, I know that I'm the one who brought this up during the strategic planning meeting, but just by looking into all the options that you provided here, and by really thinking about this, I just find out that there is really no way we can figure out like all the employer that if they paying 10.10 or not. And say if you want to buy furniture, how are we going to know those people are doing this? And if you're going to buy there is many things that city buy. And I just find out we can just go take option number 3 on this, the option that being presented by the city manager recommendation that same thing that I know that you have similar preference to the existing local preference policy, like buy locally. They have list, and now he really suggesting that we can have the same thing, like just have some people that we know they doing 10.10 and be there as a list of preference, and maybe we can use them. And if something really difficult, we can know and we have to buy something, just go ahead. because we don't have a way to know that. I really support number 3, and if you guys supporting that, we don't need to do anything.
So I guess I have comments about this. So currently we have an existing where, we have a preference for, Johnson County businesses versus non-local vendors. And I think that's awesome. But when we're talking about business owners and we're going to hold them to a 10-10, now remember some of the non-local vendors are not even in this area. They can be in a community where the cost of living is very low. 10-10 there might be an acceptable wage, potentially. It won't be the same as Johnson County as far as like living comparable living wages. So I am not in support of this on any level, only because I really do believe that for some of those new businesses that are starting, they don't even know. I mean, some of them they're very new in this. They're just trying to make it as an entrepreneur. And us not giving them government business of whether it's pins or whatever the case may be, which can really advance them to a different level where they can change their, personally change their financial status from being a real startup business to having financial resources to increase their wages for their employees. The other thing is that we don't have the ability to reach out to these vendors and educate them on our mission on, a standard wage that we think is acceptable. And so with this, because we don't have the educational abilities within our realm to reach out to businesses, I just don't support this. I do think that the overall pay for staff and wages is very important, and I think that is something that we should, as a city, continue to support livable wages. But in this content of trying to hold people that are, vendors that we could help advance them to a place where they could afford to give some of the wages that we hope for. So I don't support this, but I do appreciate.
You don't even support the first option?
The third or the first?
She was referring to the third.
Yeah.
And then yes, I do support the first, which says we do not pursue any vendor policies.
I would agree with you, Bruce. And I think, even when I look at that third one, investigate a preference policy that gives a competitive advantage for vendors that meet the desired wage levels. To me, that requires a whole lot of time and effort on the part of staff to try and get the documentation that these vendors even meet the standards that we're talking about. Is it just a voluntary compliance? How do you know they're telling you the truth? I just think we start getting into so many details that we can't, as a city, really verify. And then, as is indicated in here, we could end up in a situation where we're giving preference, say, to out-of-state companies or companies at a much larger distance rather than to local companies. So I think the complexities in terms of documentation and conflicts between local versus wages make it preferable not to address it.
I guess I don't see it as that complex.
Yes.
You essentially certify that you're paying a living wage as set forth by the Johnson County minimum wage recommendation. Maz and I just met in relation to Des Moines, and they have essentially 14 questions that they offer contractors now post-bid, and they think that that's perfectly acceptable. And so, for example, if they say, do you follow the living wage as set forth by Johnson County, and they say yes, and they have one employee who's working for them that makes below that, they can make that report, and presumably we would have a breach of contract against them. So I don't think it's that complicated, and I think it's even more complicated to live in poverty. And that is what we're trying to reduce here, is to work yourself up out of poverty through hard work. The legislature has taken away our authority to do project labor agreements. They've taken away our authority to have minimal living wage standards. And so we do have the pocket of the the purse right now, and I think we should do it. I don't think it's going to be that complicated. And it also gives us the flexibility we need if there is another worthy vendor, like if there are some underserved communities, they could add that to the point score. So we're not categorically eliminating them as far as that goes. And at least in the memo that I reviewed, Jeff did not indicate that it would be overly complex to implement. Or we do it. Let me ask you this, Jeff: for our local certification, does that cause staff a lot of angst in terms of administering that point score? Is that very complex, and we spend a lot of hours doing that?
Well, one, it's easy to verify, so no, it's not complex, and it only applies to limited purchasing situations. Our local preference is limited in scope, and you know, when I throw out these options, these are some high level. We're going to have to dig into this and come back to you and say, here's how we can work, here's how we think we can make it work, and here's all the challenges associated with it. You know, for example, local preference doesn't apply to public improvements. It doesn't apply to RFPs and RFQs. It's certain categories of hard bids because we had other limitations and complexities. We have to go through the same exercise with this, and I would agree that it would be a lot simpler for us if we allowed them to just self-certify, and you have to kind of take them at their word for it. But I don't want our staff to go, you know, be requesting payroll records or anything like that. So it has to be some sort of self-certification system. So if that's the path you want us to go down, we would come back to you at some point and say, okay, here's how this framework could work. Here's the complexities. I could give you staff, you know, some rough estimates on impacts on staff, and I'm just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I was intrigued with the concept of giving a local preference to paying a living wage. I mean, that seemed like a...
The local, yeah. That's what I mean.
It would be, in my view, it seemed like an economic development opportunity. I mean, we're trying to incentivize companies. If they pay the minimum wage, not the minimum, but the 1010, and come to Iowa City, we will give them a preference. Or if they're already here and they pay that wage, we give them a preference. I mean, it seems to be incentivizing what we want, which is promoting the local economy and paying a living wage.
And also there's local organizations that, like the Center for Worker Justice, can help you give out the list of the people who already signed the blood. I don't think this is really complicated, and we can do even more than that. But I don't want to just suggest that. As a city, if we want to do something, we can do it. And just talking about the staff time, Susan Mims, I'm sorry, but each time we bring something, you're saying the staff time, the staff hired to do the job. I appreciate the staff time, but they being hired to do that.
Right.
And you know, but not each single time staff, you know, this is too much for the staff, this is too much for the staff. No, I want the staff to come and say, we tried, we could not do it. This is too much. When they come and say that, we will say, oh my gosh, they can't do it. But we cannot just assume all the time the staff are busy, the staff cannot do things. I think we can go beyond this. I just try to make it really not complicated by taking an option that the city manager provided for us. And he is doing it for the local businesses right now. So he can do it for the also local people who pay. I'm not talking about really big stuff. I'm talking about many times have you been, the city roundtable meeting. You get food for the people. We know many restaurants here, they have, you know, they pay 10.10, and we can buy that food from them. I just think this is easy to do.
Yeah,
I don't think this is complicated.
I personally, just speaking for myself, I personally would like to revisit this at say the next meeting. I don't want to make a decision on this tonight. I think, given the time, if we kind of process this and try to get to 4 people, we could chew up a lot of time.
Can we hear from Pauline? Because now almost 3 people supporting it. We need one more.
Supporting what in particular?
An ordinance?
Local very friends.
I mean, the third option.
Yeah, I hear you right. Yeah, 3 people are supporting this, and we would like to hear from Pauline.
By local, you're referring, in your memo, Jeff, you mentioned 800 of the 1,800 are Iowa City, so those folks that are referring to local, are you referring just to those businesses in the Iowa City proper?
We'll
not
have to present you
Coralville or-
options.
Pardon me?
You could tie the two together. You could be, in order to qualify for the local preference, you have to certify that you're paying a certain wage. If you only want to limit it to locals, or you just make it doesn't matter where you're from. You could be from Canada, and if you're paying that wage, then you get a preference. That's what we have to go back. We have to work through all that and then present you with those options.
Because we don't have a way to know somebody outside this town if they paying that or not. There is no way we can figure out that. And also, even in town, some people we don't know, like if they're paying that or not. That's why I said we go. He said he can bring a list of the people that at least they pay 1010 right now, and we can provide that list from the Center for Worker Justice too, and we can use those for now. And if we find out voluntarily, somebody said we paying 1010, we can add it to the list as we go. But we don't have to complicate it. This is not really complicated.
If Pauline, if you know exactly what you want to do, we should go ahead and act. But I can tell you, I don't think we are in a position right now to make a good
That's
decision.
you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't believe we are in a position to make a
You
good
are saying
position.
we.
As a council that's been able to deliberate the question adequately. That's what I think. So
I would agree with Jim. I just think that third option doesn't tie the wages to the local. I think just the whole conversation of we know locally who's paying it. I think, as Jeff said earlier, I think this has to be all voluntary in terms of people saying that they do it. We don't, unless you're going in looking at wage sheets, you don't know. It's all voluntary in terms of people.
We have the list. Center for Worker Justice have a list.
Okay, how did they get that?
165 people said that.
Okay, so they said that.
Okay, what do you mean? If somebody told me we pay 1010, that they could be lying?
Yes. So what I'm saying, no,
we are not gonna say that. We are not gonna assume our local business people to say that.
But
I
it's
guess,
the
Mr.
same-
Mayor, let Pauline decide herself.
I agree somewhat with what the mayor is saying as far as taking a little more time to digest all of this, because the numbers, I think, were staggering that Jeff said that's a lot number
I knew
of.
that.
And he also mentioned that maybe surveying the existing vendors about their existing wages. But again, I think what Susan is alluding to is it would be all a matter of trust. I mean, you're a very trusting, believing person, Mazza, here, and so we would be trusting that, and that's 800. You said you have 165, so that's a lot of people that we would need. I mean, I agree with the concept that we shouldn't be helping out businesses that aren't following the guidelines that have been set.
Better to give to the people saying I'm paying, or just to the people that you don't know even if they're paying or not. Let us think about it, you know?
Okay, I think
that's what we need to
we
do.
don't have 4 votes for acting tonight. I would suggest that we instruct the staff to put this item on our next information packet so that we can come back to it at our May 21st meeting.
We do it at
Is
the
there
beginning of the
support
work
for that?
session?
Sorry?
Yeah, and we do it at the beginning of the work session, so we're fresh.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I think we have nothing else to do
Jim, I
in our
have
work
one, the
session.
listening
What?
post.
I'm sorry, the listening
The
post.
listening post, Bruce had mentioned he was interested.
I didn't see that.
Didn't hear a second. If we would look at either the last week of May, first week of June.
We haven't chosen a location yet, have we?
No. And there was, in the late handouts, Monday.
Yeah, I was going to recommend Lemmy School as a location.
Which school?
Lemmy? So what's the date?
I think if we're doing it at one of the schools, I don't think there's going to be a lot of problems as far as getting a date at the school. So I think it would work, whatever works out for Bruce and.
Okay, do we know who's done it for the last 2 or 3 meetings, 2 or 3 listening posts?
Yeah, in February it was Cole and Salee. November it was Throgmorton and Taylor. August, Mims and Thomas.
Okay, so Bruce is totally appropriate for Bruce to be on. Does anybody else want to volunteer for that?
Which date is it?
May. End of the
Whatever
day.
works for you guys, like
I would-
the last week of May, first
What
week
time
of
does
June.
it start?
It's kind of totally up to,
I would suggest Wednesday, the 29th. We do have the MPOJC meeting, but maybe after that meeting. I like to be a trailblazer.
6:30.
Probably 6:30.
6:30.
6:30.
To be away from any school activities, too.
Check that. And so Bruce and,
I can do it.
Awesome.
Okay, so
Who's doing it with you?
Johnny.
I think that means we're done with the work session. Okay, all right. Thank you.